Okay, hi everyone. Thank you all for tuning in today to a special Shifting the Conversation. Today we have one of our own team with us, Amy Huser, who's been our graduate advisor for a few years at ShiftSpace. We're so proud of her and happy to have her with us. Amy is a textile art installation artist and painter from Wichita, Kansas. She received her Bachelor of Fine Arts in Art History from the University of Kansas in 2014 and Master of Fine Arts in Painting in 2020 from Wichita State University. Over the past few years, the work has evolved into hand-woven and painted textile installations. Her current installation work involves the meditative and repetitive process of weaving, painting lines to mimic lines of weaving, embroidering, and hand dyeing in a painterly manner. How are you, Amy?
I am good. Thank you so much for having me do this talk today. I am very excited to share with you everything about this show and the background and everything. To start out, I just want to say a quick thank you to ShiftSpace and Groover Labs for letting me install my show here. This work has been 3 years in the making, kind of. It all started when I began going through old journals. So before I get into that, I am just going to kind of give you a brief background of how I got to this point. So when I started my studies at Wichita State in the grad program, I was really questioning some of the pressures I felt as a woman, but I started making work that was addressing specific kind of more surface level issues. Like my first textile woven piece I did was actually using old bridal materials that I had gathered from being in multiple weddings and weaving them into a piece that addressed my feelings of not measuring up to that specific idea in the sort of middle class church context that I was raised in. And so I was addressing issues like that, but then I really started to push those ideas further and question, well, where did that come from? Like, what is so woven into me that I felt like that was such a pressure? And also kind of looking back at some of the line work you see in this show, that repetitive process of making and line embroidery started my first year of grad school too. I brought this with me. This was one of the first little studies I did. And it's just kind of ironic because I noticed there's one red line in this whole kind of monochromatic piece. There's just one red line, and I now use a red line in my work, but it really sort of has been there all along and I didn't know. So that's been kind of cool to happen upon that piece and then make that realization. But yeah, so going back to that piece I made with bridal materials, that was just the beginning. And then to question sort of where that came from, I referenced all of my journals, and that's how that came into play. So looking at entries over the past 10 years, and even more than that, but just for this kind of data collection, I looked at the past 10 years. In those journals, in 14 journals over the past 10 years, my daily practice of writing, I had 730 whole dedicated entries to my feelings of unhappiness with not measuring up as a woman, with sort of those groups, middle class Christian groups, which that's kind of where it originated, but that's not where I am now. So those 730 entries really stood out to me, and it was sort of an emotional process to go back through. But now, instead of using my time to dwell on, oh, what am I doing wrong? What am I not measuring up to? Why am I being so hard on myself? That kind of thing. I am spending time in thankfulness and positive reflection, rather than all of those negative feelings. And so for reclaiming those hours, which is what I'm doing in this installation, as well as my previous installation in the Steckline Gallery, which you guys might have seen, I am continuing the process of reclaiming hour by hour that time that I spent in self-doubt. So for every red line you see woven in these pieces, whether it's super like visible, like this one here maybe, I don't know if you guys can see that on your screen, but some of them are more visible, some of them aren't, and the only rule I've given myself as I've been working in this process is to read a red line every hour to represent the hours spent in those journals, and to exclude a specific like red color from the rest of the work. Now, there are bits of red in maybe like plastic bags that were woven in, but as far as materials go, that was a rule I gave myself. So kind of talking about the rules set in place, that was done because, you know, no matter what we do for like play, meditation, like there are always some sort of structure, right? So letting go of old structures that really felt like oppressive, or old structures in which I just was so hard on myself, I'm creating these new structures, right? And so in this installation too, it's my iteration of painting in space as well as creating a playful installation that encourages movement, and movement is tied to the idea of renewing your mind. So what you guys can see on my website soon will be a walkthrough of the whole place. You can't really get the sense of moving through an installation on photographs. So that has been kind of tricky to figure out in this sort of weird time of not being able to have a show opening. But yeah, this installation has evolved over time. As you can see, it's a lot different than where the work started. In my first show, Flow, the pieces were very up and down, straight, on a grid, very subdued colors. And now it's taken a more playful, meandering, winding approach, not stuck to this grid system. And so that is something that I wanted to do with this installation too, is not be confined to the grid of a gallery, the basic like white wall grid system that is so tied to, you know, masculinity. And I'm bringing my soft fabric sculpture-ish installation to this kind of hard white wall space, and it's cutting through the gallery in a wonky grid system, I guess. So I'm just creating that new structure that I'm bringing into the space. And I'm also sorry if you guys can hear some background noise. There's some people looking in the windows right now. So going back to that sort of like grid system, I also noticed the journals that I had shredded. Most of them were on grid paper, which was, it was just kind of interesting to look back and see that. And then like shredding that like straight-laced system that I was in, and yeah, going back through shredding all of my journals, what page by page, that was a really sort of cathartic experience. And some of the pieces have a lot of those shredded journal pages woven into them, and some have other recycled materials, and that is to reference the idea of becoming something new, taking something that was discarded, something that we maybe wanted to discard, or something that just, you know, is a throwawayable item, and making it something new and repurposed, and attaching those sort of negative memories to this new, exciting, and good object. And so, yeah, attaching those associations to this show really has helped a lot. But the process is still evolving. So some of these weavings are probably going to be repurposed in the future, because what I've done already is take some of the weavings from the previous show. I sat down and I dyed them and then pieced them together, you know, one by one in a line, and painted over them. I continued the process of reclaiming time through painting a line on one side of it and then continuing that red line every hour. So in this show, you also see some reclaimed pieces, and one side is left untouched to show that, you know, this object is becoming something new too. So we're all simultaneously being in the moment and becoming something. And that really kind of bled over into my life when I began walking and running too. So this whole process has just kind of consumed everything about my life. And yeah, in that sort of being in the moment when you're taking each step running, you know where you've came from, you know the previous steps you took to get to where you're at now, but that's not the moment you're in. That's not what you can focus on. You know exactly, or maybe not exactly, but you know more of an end goal. You see the finish line. You may not see the road to get there, but it's there regardless. And you have that in your head as you're running, but you're just fully consumed in that moment, immersed in that moment that you're working on. And so that idea and the process of weaving just really related to me, like that small repetitive motion, just a small act, step by step, line by line, weaving line by line, like writing line by line. It really resonated with me because as I weave, I am in those thoughts of like, okay, where am I at now? What am I thankful for? And it sort of allows your mind to open up, and like that's kind of related to letting your mind play a little bit, because you're not focused on any one certain thing besides the practice in front of you. And I've found that to be really beautiful in the healing process, but also just the process of making these pieces. Oh, I'm sorry guys, that was a really loud bolt of thunder, or lightning and thunder. So I apologize for my reaction. And I just lost my place because of the thunder. But yeah, so the kind of repetitive bodily motion of weaving and the repetitive bodily motion of running really related to each other in this process for me. And it's only a crazy person runs a marathon their last year of grad school. But that was really symbolic for me in this process too, because it really showed me like the potential of what I can do when I push through the pain. And that's been interesting in the work as well, pushing through sort of like looking back at emotional pain. When there's something on the other side that's worth it, that's when I feel like that pain becomes acceptable in a way, like, you know, there's a purpose for it. And so that's been interesting in the work, because yeah, like this installation is so joyful, playful, full of movement and color, and the process it took to get there wasn't all just happy-go-lucky joy, you know, but the potential for it to become that made it worth it. And I'm very excited that this show is up and that the playfulness comes through in that, because as I sat down to weave and my mind was sort of open to play, it really affected the colors I was grabbing, I think. Maybe subconsciously, I was like starting to go towards more bright colors, just as I like grew in that like thankfulness and joy for how I'm turning out now in that transformation. So yeah, the lighting in the show, which you guys can't really see on the computer screen, because even this piece behind me has like a nice kind of purpley pink glow, and that doesn't translate over the screen. So when I do have an opening later on, highly encourage you to come see it in person. But the lighting, I wanted to create an ambiance throughout the whole room as you walk through, just to kind of encourage participation and movement through the space, because as I've said before, movement has been so tied to renewing your mind, and actually not even running, just like keeping your hands busy. Like one artist that really has, I guess, influenced the way I make, but really speaks about it in a language that's so concise and beautiful, is Anne Hamilton. Hamilton describes the process of like knitting or being at her loom as letting the body fall open to absorb what is around you, what's in your mind, when in this process of repetitive motion of practicing something that you know what to do, but you just do it. And I think we can all relate to that in our artistic practices or other areas of our life. But that's why I wanted to envelop the whole thing in light too, not only to reference like painting on pieces, but to cast light on the viewer themselves and have the shadows of the pieces and the viewer interact. So that's the reason behind that. And yeah, I feel like I have been talking for a long time. I probably haven't talked for that long, but if anyone has any questions, I am open to questions now. So yeah, sorry for the little freak out about the thunder.
Yeah, if anyone does have questions, feel free to unmute yourself, turn your video on if you want. Let's have a discussion here. I really enjoyed personally how you talked about repetitive motion, because that feels especially poignant right now, with so many of us just like stuck in our houses, repeating our same, daily task, I guess, is the only way I can think to put it, just even around the house. It seems like that's all we have to do. So I think even though like we can't necessarily be in the space with you in this moment, when we are able to, I think it will resonate once we're able to step outside of that.
Right, and the whole idea there is like being able to meditate through that motion and through the process at your hands, you know? And so that like meditation and allowing your mind to fall open and sort of a little creative in that headspace is kind of nice. But yeah, meditation here is a little more playful than the meditation that I had in the journals beforehand that I was referencing. So yeah, I'm kind of reclaiming that process as well. Meditation doesn't have to be super somber, and it doesn't have to reflect on all the negative things. Although there is a place for that, but you know, I spent 730 hours or more on it. So I'm reclaiming that time.
I had a question.
Yeah.
So is the reason why you use so many really calming, cool colors in your work is because of that tie to meditation?
You know, it might be. So I've always been drawn to like those blues, you know, and my work has evolved from there to incorporate a lot more colors, but it's still very on that color palette. And yeah, the qualities that it has to be a little more like serene and soothing definitely led me to work with those colors. Yeah.
Wait, I don't have a question. I just have a comment for you. So I took photos of this piece when it was hanging in McKnight show, and just thought it was absolutely gorgeous. Like I couldn't stop looking at it even while I was like taking pictures of everybody else's pieces, just because I thought like formally and aesthetically it was just beautiful. And so then coming here and like being able to hear inspiration and all of like work that you say, just like how much it means to you, just makes it that much more to look at, honestly.
And like the idea of beauty in the work, I tried to run away from it for so long because, you know, it's like I don't want to just make aesthetic choices. So the process of weaving really helped me to not do that, because all I can see is that foot in front of me. Where sometimes in weaving, you can plan out a super intricate piece, have it all planned out, know exactly what's going where, and make aesthetic choices that way. But for my process, I really went line by line, grabbing what was at hand, and incorporating the found materials and recycled materials really helped bring the color in because it was up to what I had. So yeah, that's, I guess, how I would talk about the beauty in the work, and the process of becoming and transforming from like a more self-doubt area to being more confident in who you are is a beautiful thing, no matter what that means for you. So, yeah.
I had a question. I don't know where the raise hand thing is on my screen, so that's why. Oh. Can you hear me?
I can. Sorry,
Oh, okay.
there's a little bit of background noise. So.
Oh yeah, sorry, it's the rain. So I really liked the first, or one of the piece that you showed us that was like the first one that you brought.
Yeah, this was from.
Yeah, like the little sketch. So I think what I find interesting about this one is like the organic forms on the edges. Is that something that you thought about maybe like doing as you progress with your work, since it's like weavings are all like rectangular? Have you thought about like maybe doing different forms, or is the rectangle like super important?
So for me, because I was like thinking of these as meandering almost like brush strokes through space, like kind of my iteration of that, I kept the weaving very long and thin, and that's what informed that decision. But yeah, this kind of organic feel I wanted to bring to the layout of the space. It's getting really loud and I'm really sorry, but I wanted to bring that layout to the space. So in the pieces themselves, they're very linear, but as they're hung, it sort of brings in this organic sort of edge. So yeah, I think that's been kind of an interesting progression in the work too that I didn't really think about till you asked that question. So thank you.
Sorry. Oh.
No, it's good. And something I wanted to say too, like, why am I working with textiles? It has been so tied in the United States, at least, to women's work. You know, the 60s and 70s, we saw a resurgence of craft, and then we saw artists who were using the medium to both like critique it, its ties to domesticity, and accept it at the same time. So there's that tension in the work, and that's sort of what I'm bringing into. And I think it's hailing now, so we're dealing with that noise. Sorry.
Yeah. No, thank you for answering my question. I muted myself because it was hailing over here, so I didn't want you.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed you explaining your work, and I'm glad that you like worked through some ideas that you were working through in your previous exhibition, and I'm just really proud of you, and I love you. So
Thank you so much, and love you too, girl. But yeah, this like, there's so much more to this work that if you could see it in person, that would be ideal. So hopefully in like a month or two, that can happen.
I had a question. I was wondering, I know you had mentioned it earlier, of how many hours were you able to reclaim for this show?
So for this show, and I need to go back and actually like sit here and count everything, but there is at least 200, but again, it's like I need to sit down and recount again. So this is an ongoing process, and I mean, you saw how much the work changed from the beginning of last year, I guess, when the work was very like hung up and down in the gallery, still kind of in that process of like coming out of my shell, I guess. So I'm excited to see how it's going to continue to change and evolve. Like the process is ever evolving, just as like this personal transformation is. So that I don't know where it's going to take me. I'm going to allow myself to play in that, but I'm still going to abide by those rules I gave myself of the red line for every hour reclaimed, and who knows where it'll take me. So yeah, I'm going to continue working in installation because I feel like it embodies those ideas.
That's really great.
Thanks.
I guess this is sort of half a question, half a comment, but when you were explaining why you stuck to the very linear, long textiles that you do, I was thinking of possibly like it being a path almost, since you tied in running with your work. That could be like, maybe your textiles are showing the path of yourself and where you're going as well as your life. Or it could be like, since you also use your writings in your work, it could also be like, you know how text usually you follow linearly, like down the line of like a book whenever you're reading. Maybe that could be something.
Yeah, so that's, as I was working on these, I was also thinking about, you know, a path through the space, but these as sort of like a journey themselves is definitely a good read of what's going on. But the kind of more fringe pieces, I did want to say, because I was having some foot issues and couldn't press down on my loom as much towards the end of this grad school experience. That's my interpretation of weaving as well. So I used what I could, and the process evolved there too. So, yeah.
Anyone else have any other questions for Amy?
Well, if not, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm sorry I was a little distracted by the storm. So.
You did great, and we will have some form of an opening at ShiftSpace in the coming future. So just stay tuned for that announcement on Facebook and Instagram, and we will keep you updated as soon as we can figure out how to operate in these times. But thanks everyone for joining. It was great. Thank you, Amy. The work looks amazing and all the images I've seen, and I can't wait to see it in person.
Thank you.